And we're back here on The Explainer with Kalonzo Musyoka, Senior Counsel, Wiper Party leader and former Vice President of the Republic of Kenya from 2008 to the year 2013, talking about the big events that have taken the country's attention, which he says are a diversionary tactic.
Yes, indeed. Let me reiterate that point. But before I do, I know that some of our viewers are a bit concerned as to why a presidential candidate, right, would find it opportune to come to the studios. And this is what I think young Kenyans, the Gen Z generation in particular, have been trying to tell us, that to get rid of our egos, because elsewhere in developed democracies, those who are interested in elective office go out and meet. Media is very important, and that's so I'm happy that you invited me to come over. Back to the question, we consider that this whole impeachment drama and fever is diversionary because there are issues that are of serious concern to the nation at the present moment. Yesterday we talked about capture of the state by, we call them quote-unquote merchants of Venice. And I was accompanied by some of my colleagues in the loyal opposition movement, the Honorable Eugene Wamala, Mheshimiwa Jeremiah Kioni, Secretary General of Jubilee, and Eugene is a party leader of DAP, and a host of other leaders who came, including Babayao, was also always available. So we think that instead of dealing with this impeachment, the thing is a smokescreen to avoid the issues that are affecting the ordinary Kenyans. We talked of state capture and likened what is happening in the country right now to what happened that time during President Zuma in South Africa. The Gupta family that took over a whole country. And it was very costly to President Zuma. So we are thinking here, this Andani thing, and we must also quickly say we have nothing personal. I don't know who Andanis are. In fact, Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister of India, is a very reputable international leader. I remember visiting him when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat State. And so nothing personal about anything. But really we are saying that before investors come into this country, they have to do due diligence. Do you know the Kenyans online have already done due diligence on what this Andani group is all about? Okay? Separate from the matter of PPP, public-private partnership, which is a law itself, not very clearly understood and elaborated. So when we say it was diversionary, that's what we mean. We have a state capture of our own critical infrastructure. You think of power generation and transmission, KETRACO, and the state capture. And they have even now, of course, the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport itself. It's a serious matter. Critical national infrastructure. Yeah. I am not aware of any country in the world which would give out its international airport to outside investors because of the security implications. All right? So this is what we call diversionary. But instead, what is happening? A whole drama about impeachment of the Deputy President.
We'll come back and talk about the impeachment for a moment. But it's interesting that you say you don't know who Adani is. Senator Dan Manzo, right here on Citizen Television earlier this week, claimed that the Indian firm Adani Group in fact sponsored Raila Odinga's presidential campaign in 2012. A joint ticket for which you were his running mate.
Well, yeah. When people are running for office.
So now that I'm asking you, because you were Raila, you were Raila Odinga's running mate in 2012. Yeah. Did Adani Group sponsor your presidential campaign?
I can tell you I wouldn't know, because when you have a presidential candidate, how they organize their finances normally is all left to themselves. And the running mate, and I think as Gachagua might himself probably concede, Yeah, when it comes to fundraising for a presidential campaign, it is different. But having said that, I actually called Dan Manzo and told him he needs to apologize to Baba because Baba is still his party leader as of now. Okay? So that is a matter that I do not want to comment on. The point is I don't know.
But because you're here and you were on that ticket, so you're saying you don't know or Adani was not involved?
I have no idea who Adani is. I've never met him.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And he didn't fund the campaigns or did he?
I wouldn't know. How would I know? Because look at it. And this is the issue. Perhaps it is the core of what we are discussing.
Yeah.
Maybe Gachagua did not know how William Ruto funded his campaign.
Okay.
It is not always that because you're the running mate, you bring all the money to one basket.
But Mr. Kalonzo, help us understand.
It doesn't work that way.
All right. So how does it work? Because when we spoke to you here just a few minutes ago, you said the ticket is joint. It is one.
Yes.
Right?
But joint ticket does not mean joint financing, joint everything. It is in law a joint ticket.
Yes.
But when it comes to campaign financing...
In law is one thing. But help us understand then how this relationship works between a candidate, a presidential candidate and their running mate, a president and their deputy president. Because from what you're saying, from your personal experience with running with Raila Odinga in 2012...
Yeah, and 2013
yes.
and in 2017.
Correct.
All right?
So from what you're saying, this isn't then a joint ticket. Might be on paper or in law, but it isn't a joint ticket in the sense that you're working together. Is that what you're saying is the relationship between the two?
Let me tell you, look at all this, perhaps even look at Kamala Harris's campaign, which has raised a lot of money, all right? And of course that of Donald Trump. When you have the president, all right, running as president, he has a team, including campaign financiers and others who actually not even get to be known. But I can tell you my own experience straight away. I never asked Raila Odinga, can we raise money here? How much money have you raised? I never did.
Why?
Because it was not appropriate.
Why not?
It was not appropriate.
Why
and maybe that is why I'm different.
Okay,
because
let me ask.
I came out supporting Raila Odinga with my own resources.
Why would it not be appropriate for you? Your name is on the ticket.
Yeah.
You are the running mate.
Yeah.
If you would have won the election, you would be the deputy president.
Yeah.
And possibly next in line should a vacancy arise in the office of the president. So why would you be in the dark about such important things?
I think we have a lot more important business to discuss.
It's important for us to understand. No,
this one, allow me.
No, allow us to, because...
not because Dan Manzo raised it here.
No, not because of that, but because you have now opened the door, and what we are trying to understand as Kenya...
Then I tell you straight.
...is the relationship between the two, right? And so you've said you didn't ask anything about the financing, but if something happens, and as deputy president, you were to rise to the position of president...
Then we'll deal with it at that point.
But you didn't want to know how the campaign was funded?
No, my mind was focused... My mind was focused on getting my brother, Raila Odinga, to become president of Kenya. And I trusted his abilities to fundraise. And if he found it appropriate to say, I'll assist my running mate to pay for so many agents, that was okay. But I'm never the type. And perhaps I think it's important the country gets to know what type of people we are. And I think this is where the problem is between Gachagua and Ruto, and between Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta.
But wouldn't some say, because that is an important aspect to be able to understand the relationship.
And I think we have such a long thing to cover that I don't want us to spend time on this one.
Well, then let's finish it now, which is the question around if funds were from dubious sources, would you not want to know as running mate?
I wouldn't. It was never, in fact, it never occurred to me that I would probe a matter on fundraising of a campaign presidential candidate whom I had pledged to support wholeheartedly, resources or no resources. So that is the bottom line. And so I want that subject.
Yes, because...
The important thing is I said I don't know who Adani is, right? I've heard that he's probably related to big, political leaders in his country, and that is my interest. And again, I have nothing personal against Adani. That's why I said, for example, there must be probity of on what Daniel Manzo himself said.
Okay.
I wouldn't want him to get away with mudslinging.
All right.
But if he has evidence, he can also present it.
Mr. Musyoka, there is also probity around the issues of campaign financing.
Yeah, and
therefore,
I can tell you this.
But
the current parliament has refused to enact campaign financing law for these three simple reasons, all right? Because people want to do donkey work. They want to do money laundering. They want to do things, okay? And they know that, I tell you, when I went to Parliament in 1985, there was a law saying a member of Parliament cannot spend, if you're running for office, for election as member of Parliament, you could not spend more than 30,000 Kenya shillings. Today, today, how much are they donating in Harambes? 20 million in bags and things?
So you say...
So they will never want to regulate campaign financing.
But why would they, Mr. Kalonzo Musyoka, when you yourself do not question the source of campaign funds for a ticket that you are personally on? Why would you expect that of Parliament when you yourself have just admitted here that you did not... No, it's not a matter of admission. No, but you've just said here...
I tell you...
Allow me to ask the question, Mr. Musyoka. You've just said here that you did not ask Mr. Raila Odinga...
but that's not admission.
Okay. So you did not ask...
You're talking to a lawyer, by the way.
That's fine. You said you did not ask Mr. Raila Odinga about the source of the campaign financing, right? You trusted him implicitly.
Yes.
But yet you want Parliament to be able to probe that
because
when
then
you yourself did not probe
those questions will then be asked by Kenyans when you will be held to account. How did you fundraise? How did you spend your money?
And those questions will be asked to who? Not to you as the running mate?
Of course, it cannot be now. It cannot be then. We are dealing with what the law should be, not what the law is. All right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let us talk about then this position of Deputy President, Vice President as it existed before 2010. What's your experience? Because you ran in, first of all, you ran in 2007.
Yes.
And then, you know, we all know what happened in this country following that negotiation process. Then you became vice president. And obviously becoming vice president in, you know, rather unique circumstances where you were not, well, then we didn't necessarily have a running mate, but you were running against the person. Tell us what that experience was like as vice president and maybe your thoughts around this position, because we thought the new constitution would, you know, bring in some sort of sanity to the position. But from what we've seen, even with former President Uhuru Kenyatta and his then deputy, William Ruto, there was trouble there, and there's trouble here now. What are your thoughts around this position and whether the constitution has helped, if at all?
I think it has to do with the chemistry of leaders. You talk about the first in command and the second in command of a whole nation. Let me say, before Constitution 2010 was enacted, we did not have the post of Deputy President. We had the Vice President.
Yeah.
And the framers of the Constitution wanted to make it very, very difficult, right, for whoever is elected president to just get rid of his deputy, or indeed the deputy to undermine the president. So that, and that is where the stress was there on the one ticket thing. But when I became vice president, the 10th vice president, it was not because I was on the same ticket with the late President Kibaki, but it was because we had to form a coalition. Eventually, it became Africa's first grand coalition government. I think Zimbabwe followed thereafter, because following the Kofi Annan talks, Raila Odinga joined as prime minister. We had to amend the constitution at that time, before we now inaugurated Constitution 2010. So my working relationship with Mzee Kibaki was very cordial. And it was out of serious respect, because the country was burning when ODM Kenya, as it then was, joined with Kibaki's PNU to form the PNU alliance. And I can tell you, the country's economy grew at some stage at nearly 7% of our GDP. Kenyans had hope. Kenyans began to see money in their pockets. And so, quite frankly, what happened thereafter is a contradiction, because one would have expected, if you now have Constitution 2010, you have a president and a deputy on one ticket, that if they assumed office, they would be of the same mind. But what did we experience between Uhuru and Ruto? A lot of friction. The Tanga movement. And then I think that time people like Matiang'i were asked to chair cabinet committees, but Uhuru Kenyatta did not find it appropriate to, to go beyond that and impeach his deputy. Or the deputy perhaps create a motion to impeach the president. But everybody in this country knew the 2022 elections were heavily influenced by the manner in which the two leaders worked. And so, William Ruto and Gachagua, 2 years down the line, they can't even sit together. They can't even forgive each other. I've seen Ole Sapit, the spiritual leader of Anglican movement, saying we try to put these people together. Their spouses are known as prayer warriors. They can't even listen to their spouses, okay? So, and the whole thing has a direct implication on the quality of lives of the Kenyan people. And now, as I said, once again, instead of dealing with the high cost of living, instead of sorting out our mismanaged education sector, and I once was Minister for Education, when we actually brought out, or when we were able to promulgate the free primary education, free and affordable secondary education, today, parents cannot take their kids to university. Yesterday, I saw a pastor in my office. He came to me and said, my kid is admitted to join the Raka University, and they're asking me to pay 97,000 shillings. I don't have. Can you help me? There are many Kenyans who cannot now afford university education. And the reason is the very top is not holding. Things have actually fallen apart. When things fall apart, as Chinua Achebe would say, then all of us get affected.
Tell me, there's some who say, and I believe the Deputy President has probably said that in his court pleadings, we're not going to get into that, but there are some who believe that this will cause political destabilization in the country. What do you think of that view?
I can tell you Kenyans are depressed. They really are depressed. While they expect their leaders to help them, right, get along, get jobs. For those who go through university, there are thousands, and go to industrial area every morning. They leave Kibera and go to look to actually queue for the few jobs that may be available, manual jobs. After all, Kenya Kwanza said, kazi ni kazi. Even that kazi ni kazi, hakuna. What is happening is a lot of people, companies, manufacturing companies that should be setting up places of business in Kenya are fleeing instead because of high taxation, and we have had time to discuss this matter elsewhere. Overtaxation. Kenyans are the most overtaxed people on earth. Okay? Everybody with an envelope has to pay so much in terms of housing tax, housing levy, or whatever it is, this, the levy, and the other. So businesses find it impossible to set up places. I can tell you this country, are they taking it up from where Kibaki and us left it? We would now be thinking of middle income status. Remember, these days you don't hear of Vision 2030, Yvonne. And we had even flagship projects, some in the energy sector, which is now getting messed up, all right? Which would then help this country generate in excess of 4,000 megawatts of electricity and be able then to make it cheap to do business in Kenya. Because doing business in Kenya here is very expensive. So a lot of companies choose to go to Tanzania, others go to 10th of Ramadan city in Egypt and other places. So
what do you think the effect of this process will be on the Kenyan political scene, perhaps also, the economy? Do you see a direct cause and relation between what's happening in the country right now and what the Senate is about to tackle tomorrow and what could happen after?
You know now, this is very sad. because the process is predetermined, according to me. Today, the House Business Committee of the National Assembly met, and they decided to have a special sitting on Friday, okay? National Assembly, which means they've already prejudged what the Senate is going to do. You hear of colossal sums of money circulating. If one senator is difficult, his price tag goes up or something, some of course are independent, some will never be compromised. And so is that the kind of country the framers of this constitution had in mind? So it's a country now bedeviled with all manner of corruption at any level, corruption. And that is what made our children come up and say, anguka nayo. All right? So unless we come up and say no, because I'm telling you now, this matter, unless the courts come and stop the whole process, Gachagua's goose is cooked. Because on Friday, President Ruto is supposed to bring his nominee to the House, and the nominee will then be read out, the name will be read out by Speaker Wetangula, my good friend, all right? And the Constitution says under Article 149 that within 60 days, they should confirm that appointee. It looks to me like William Ruto does not want me to face Heroes Day with the Gachagua by side or welcoming him. It's gone to that level. It is really at that level. What I think both of them should recognize is the country is looking up to them. This is why they are saying, go home together if you have to.
Okay. So, Kufa, earlier you said Kufa Dereva, Kufa Makanga.
So Mimi, by the way, the Kenyans. And I'm told at midnight, every time, all the clubs where at night they stop and the DJs sing, Ruto must go. And I was shocked, as I told you. I just arrived, I went straight for this muscle building event, Champions of East Africa, and I was wearing a cap.
Yeah.
I was like incognito, but somebody said, you know, as awarding the winners of the first lot. Then suddenly, an eruption. Ruto must go. I can tell you that shook me. If that is the mood in the country, then if I was William Ruto, I would rethink that strategy. Because at that level, when you have the president, the deputy, by the way, you're talking national security.
Yeah.
National security. The chairman of the National Security Committee is the president himself. The vice chair of the deputy is supposed to be the deputy president. I don't know whether the National Security Advisory Committee is advising President William Ruto. I'm now talking to you as a former vice president, because I used to sit with President Kibaki and look at issues. You see, as we speak, people in Tana River are killing each other. And instead of people dealing with that situation, all right, you are now fixated on this matter of impeachment.
So tell me, as a senior counsel, what are your thoughts around, you know, this position of the president and the deputy? Because there was the moment when there was vice president sort of essentially served at the will, you know, of the president, who was the appointing authority. We lived in this country where we saw dismissals that could happen. And then we thought to anchor this position in law. And yet it seems like we still have the same issues, perhaps even worse. What are your thoughts then on how do we deal with this position? How do we make this, you know, a bit of a smooth relationship going forward? We've tried it one way with a different constitution. We've tried it this way with the new constitution, but nothing seems to be working. What are your thoughts around that as a senior counsel? As someone who's
not just a senior counsel,
someone who has occupied that position before, your thoughts around what we do with these two positions in the country, so we're not here again.
Again, I was the 10th vice president, so you can see there was a pretty high turnover.
Yes.
We are dealing with...
You are one of the ones who served...
Now we have the fourth. Is it the fourth or the fifth president, right?
Yes.
Fifth edition of the president.
Right.
When it comes to the vice presidents, we are now dealing with...
Second, maybe.
No, I was the 10th, and then after that,
yeah.
Gachagua.
No, but now we're dealing with the second DP.
The second DP.
You know, under the Constitution.
Ruto
right.
and Gachagua.
Yeah.
Actually, both of them, right? Come to think of it, could it be there's a problem between Ruto and Gachagua as deputy presidents themselves? Because, again, there has to be a chemistry of understanding. By the way, I think the framers of the Constitution also must have noticed that the president, the deputy, may not necessarily see things the same way.
Which is why they put a law.
And that's why they say it's important that none of them kicks up the other.
Right.
Right? Look at the current cabinet. The only elected people there are President Ruto and his deputy. The others are appointees, and they are yes people. So if Gachagua, for example, because I heard him talk my language, and I'm not here to defend him, when the demolitions happened along the Nairobi River, and people are supposed to be paid 10,000 shillings, he came out and said, this is not enough, this is not good. And he looked at even the international covenants governing conduct of governments when it comes to forceful displacement of people. Today, the people in this city are miserable. Even the 10,000, I wonder whether they got it. The demolitions happen. Now, if the deputy president advises his boss and tells him, hey, Mr. President, this is not right. You and I are the only ones elected.
Yeah.
Don't you think the president should instead give him compliment?
All right,
I went to Gikomba market, not Gikomba.
On that,
yes.
Mr. Kalonzo Musyoka, those who are pushing for his impeachment say, well, there's a forum to raise those issues.
They even quote collective.
Well, yeah.
Collective, what is it? Collective...
collective responsibility but, and accountability. But one can surmise that the fact that this wasn't raised between the two of them...
I don't know.
Or in cabinet, or perhaps was, but that he raised this outside of that space, indicates a breakdown of their relationship.
Not necessarily. It actually indicates some checks and balances within that ticket.
Okay.
All right? And I know you like to talk about the ticket and money. Okay? So the point is, within that ticket, if one is able to advise the other that I'm listening to the ground, Mr. Gachagua liked to call himself Mr. Truthful Man. Okay? He actually came to Wakulima Market after I'd gone there because the city county was threatening to throw them out and just make them feel completely homeless and uncared for. He actually came, and I gave him accolades for that. I imagine that should not have been seen to be a breach of the doctrine of collective responsibility.
So
but
you see
rather,
checks and balances?
anything that falls or is not seen to be in consonance with the Constitution, then I think the collective, anything that doctrine of collective responsibility will fall flat in the face of the Constitution. Okay. So the deputy president should not then be impeached because of this. Okay. That's why I started saying, and I'm not here to defend him, I don't know, the last line of defense in this whole matter will be the judiciary. And we have seen what has been happening to the judiciary. Justice Mugambi had his security withdrawn and threatened and intimidated. Kenyans, we have to be on the lookout for a possibility of being drawn into a serious dictatorship. All right? So the last line of defense, the senior counsel now, this is why I can speak. We will respect. If we do not respect our judicial system, then we have no country. Because as it is now, truth be said, Parliament is under, and even Raila Odinga used to say that before, I don't know what happened. Okay. But used to say Parliament has been captured, all right, by the executive. So the judiciary, and I plead and I pray to God as a believer that the judiciary will hold for the sake of this nation.
All right. What would you do if you were in Rigathi Gachagua's place right now? There's talk that, you know, he should resign to perhaps save himself the ignominy of, being impeached and perhaps have a chance at serving in public office once again, depending on how things go. He himself is on record as saying he is not resigning and he will see this process through to its logical conclusion. What would you do?
I think I respect his judgment. because the stage at which this process is now, if he resigns, then everybody will say, ah, yes, there are things. And in fact, he runs the risk of now being charged. A manipulation, trumped-up charges. Have we not seen that? And then all manner of things to demean his character. If I live in this country, the population is on the side of the Deputy President. Not because they love him or anything, but I think because they see that instead of following what we want to see, the ticket, going home together, you should not separate this ticket. Because they see injustice. And injustice committed to one person, even if he's Deputy President, is injustice to the whole country. So his decision to go on until the end of the process, I think is laudable. If I was in his shoes, I'll go all the way. At least I can have a name to take home with me. You don't have always to do things in order to please or to be afraid. Because if he has nothing in his conscience, he should fight on. But if there are things, you know, they open those cupboards and there are skeletons and things, then he'll be afraid. But I think if he has nothing to fear, it is good. It's also education for this country, so that children will be born many years will know there once was a deputy president. Maybe the others will be impeached. Perhaps this time it will be a whole president being impeached. That is what you want to know. That is what the young generation, the Gen Zs and the millennials and majority of Kenyans want to get their country back. As it is going downhill at a speed that nobody ever imagined.
Should the president be impeached?
Well, that's a different question. I told you, in my view, what he has committed are some of the impeachable offenses. And I gave you an example. The example of the abductions, because he's the one who has sworn to uphold the rights of every citizen, and the right to life is paramount. Article 43 on the basic rights, Article 43 of the Constitution is so important. And the one to whom much is given, much is expected. But now, who would impeach him? Is it what I call, quote unquote, the impeached parliament? Because when you have people, I'll give you an example and let these people remain nameless. An MP says, he's called by his party leader, and he says, the party leader advises, don't vote yes. And the man says, man, I'm staring at 1 million shillings. I don't have it. I need this million. Okay? But he remembered, but I promise I'll never vote yes. So he went ahead and voted no. Let them remain nameless. If that is the state, Yvonne, of our democracy, if this is the conduct of elected leaders, we should be looking at the law as proposed by the executive and all these things. There are lots of legislation that is being awaited, including, by the way, the NADCO report, all right? Because there are eight pieces of legislation which are supposed to be passed on the basis as it were. But nobody thinks about that now. Everybody is fixated on this impeachment process. So I wouldn't at this stage, William Ruto is completely in charge of Parliament. And perhaps the Senate, we shall see tomorrow. If there will be men, like the 44 men and women I saw, stand out there and vote no, not because they love Gachagua, but because they think this whole thing is flawed. Let's go back to the matter of public participation. One would have expected at every constituency, first of all, people be given enough time to go to their constituency headquarters, and there will be their representative Gachagua to take note, to say, yeah, these ones are voted yes, this one no, but what happened there? And people just literally ticked and go out there and say on the floor of the House that public participation has agreed with this motion. I call that
in your view,
fraudulent. I'm sorry, fraudulent, and I hope the courts will find as such. Again, look at the Finance Act itself, 2023 and 2024. Kenyans know that 95% of Kenyans, after public participation, which was properly organized at that time, said they were against the increased taxation measures by William Ruto's administration. But what happened? The state captured, or the executive captured parliament, went ahead and voted against the Finance Act. 2024, forget about even the 2023, of course, they voted against. 2024, the Gen Zs came, and they succeeded where some of us did not succeed. Again, the backdrop of a population saying no to this punitive taxation. So, this whole thing about public participation,
how should it be done?
A senior council, if it is properly addressed, might get Gachagua off the hook.
All right.
Therefore, I think it's good it goes all the way.
What suggestions do you have, as senior counsel, as to, how to conduct this? The courts have been, asked to make determinations on the manner in which it should be done, the thresholds that should be met. We know there's, already a bill around that. But what are your thoughts, as senior counsel around, how to incorporate this very important principle that is in the Constitution, but is yet to be sort of fully manifested or realized in law? I've seen some saying, for instance, Paul Mwita argues in court that there's 14 million voters, but you had only an average of, 200, maybe less than 300 people who gave their votes. What in your view should be a threshold for public participation? One, in terms of numbers. Two, in terms of views, even as the country continues to give its views on, the public participation bill.
There is, as you say, a pending bill. And perhaps this current parliament, as presently constituted, can still go ahead and enact that legislation. Then it will now set those thresholds. But that notwithstanding, the fact that the Constitution itself says there shall be public participation, that is written on stone. So you can't gerrymander. You can't defraud the people. Because for me, that is my concern, that a whole parliament will sit there and pronounce falsehoods on the Kenyans when Kenyans said that ticket should go home. And they said it from every corner. So that is my problem with this whole process. And as I said, I actually am not here to defend Gachagua in any way, but I think he has done the right thing to say, let him push this thing to the very end.
Okay. My question is, what are your thoughts on how we can properly enact public participation? What do you think are some of the key aspects of that law that then fully realizes the intention of the Constitution with respect to public participation?
If, for example, there must be a clause which will specifically say, in the event that 95% of the respondents, i.e. Kenyans, participating in that particular case, say, approve this bill, and 5% say no, clearly should be indicated that the majority will have their way. But as it is now, it is a majority who lose completely. But
what should that threshold look like? So let's say you're saying 90%,
maybe 60%.
That's all right.
I think 60% is fair.
Okay.
In order to come up with a situation of general consensus.
Okay, but 60% of how many
of the respondents, or whoever. But first of all, you need to get the cluster. How many people, if people have their memoranda sent to them, and say 2,000 have sent in their memorandum or memoranda. Out of the 2,000, if 1,600, say we are against this proposal, then that should be carried. That's a useful threshold, because it does indicate some consensus.
Is 2,000 a good enough representative
It's just an example.
number? Yeah,
I give you that as an example.
Yes, so I'm asking, in your view...
Because you have to look at a sample.
What would be the acceptable sample size?
No, it depends on the type of legislation you are dealing with. If, for example, you are to look at this impeachment matter, and you're looking at 290 constituencies, if there was proper public participation in accordance with the law...
Which law? There is no law.
There's no law.
Yeah.
For now. This is why the people are defrauded.
Right.
Okay? And I don't need to gainsay that point. It's a defrauding situation. But assume there's an act of parliament, all right? Then, out of the 290 constituencies, all right, clearly you need, in order to have the motion go through and say people have said yes to this impeachment, you at least get 200.
Okay,
200
so you believe it should be done at constituency level?
Well, I don't even know why it was decided, because initially you said whoever it was doing it, the clerk to the National Assembly said, let's do it. I don't know, and then they ended up at, was it counties, and I think Kachagwa must have gone to court or something.
He did, yes.
And then a decision was taken that no, go to every constituency.
Yeah, so
instead of now having time to prepare,
okay,
they say extend.
So, right.
Ridiculous stuff.
I'm trying to understand, and maybe you can help us here, being a senior counsel, what your thoughts are around what the level of public participation should be. Should it be ward level, constituency level? What do you think is an adequate sample size that then represents the views of the public? And then speak to us about the qualitative and quantitative aspects of the views that are brought there. What, in your view, because there's public participation being conducted now around this, what, in your view, should be the parameters of all of these that would then, be solidified in the law, should it be passed?
I mean, you're probably looking at the impeachment law, for example. No.
I'm looking at the principle of public participation.
Okay.
Across the board.
Because
whether it's an impeachment or an act of parliament,
yeah.
I want to know what your views are with respect to how public participation should be conducted and what would be the threshold in terms of numbers, in terms of levels, of governance.
Look at taxation law, measures to get Kenyans pay taxes, all right? A lot of people may not be aware that when they go to a supermarket and buy a packet of unga, it has got some VAT aspect to it and other types of taxation. First of all, that act itself should stipulate what are the issues over this taxation. There's VAT, there's other types of taxation, then Kenyans will now be will be adequately prepared to answer in terms of VAT, yes, in terms of income tax or whatever other taxation, housing levy, fuel levy, road maintenance levy. Then they know the stuff they're dealing with. Then from there, you can then establish, in my view, some threshold. All right? And then the level at which that should be conducted. I don't believe a matter as elaborate as taxation, because it's everybody's business. It should perhaps even be at the constituency level. I would hesitate to think it should go to the ward level. Okay? But when you have just parliament sitting, and again you have professional bodies, there are people adequately prepared to deal with this subject. When we sat in Bomas and listened to presentation by professional bodies on these issues, we were adequately, quite properly impressed by some of the presentations. But if you ask Wanjiku in Githurai to comment on these things, maybe overtaxing us. Therefore, first of all, there's need for public education. All right? This is why, again, to come back to our subject matter, there wasn't time to do proper public participation in this impeachment process.
What would be a reasonable time?
Honestly, when the clerk to the National Assembly said, now that the courts have ruled that you must go to the constituency, each of the 290 or proceed by midday tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, again, here I'm speaking in general in terms of public participation, because that has been an issue, I think, that has gripped the country since the Kenya Kwanza administration took office. So just, helping us understand public participation, because that's definitely something we're all grappling with. What times are important, the qualitative versus the quantitative? Should laws perhaps be simplified? Should they be translated into how many languages?
I wish I could get copy.
I just want to hear your
I wish I could
this.
get copy of that bill, if indeed there's a draft bill, and whether it has even gone through the process, the House Business Committee, because it should be fast-tracked. Because then those questions you're asking would then be deliberated.
Okay.
Kenyans will be able to say qualitatively,
Mr.
quantitatively.
Kalonzo, I'm asking you,
Yes.
as senior counsel,
Yes.
what your thoughts are on that. I mean, at the level of senior counsel, there's Kenyans who want to hear what your thoughts would be. Parliament will deliberate it, but because we're in the moment of public participation on a bill on public participation, I just want to hear what your thoughts are.
To be ready. Because as senior counsel, again, I cannot tell you.
No, we're not asking you to tell them what to do. I just want to hear your thoughts, particularly on how we should conduct public participation in general in this country, and what would be the key tenets of it.
You see, again, if you look at the constituency, there should be enumerators. There should be people, first of all, before you even take a vote, people need to be educated on the subject matter. And I don't need to, I think, belabor that point, that there must be some kind of public education, all right? Civic education. And Kenyans are not averse to civic education. So the matter of civic education, in my view, is key before you enact the public participation law.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about this now called broad-based government. In September, you said Raila was duped in the broad-based government.
Yeah. I think that without going into details, because the Azimio leader is Raila Odinga, the party leader, okay? The coalition chair is Uhuru Kenyatta. But we haven't sat for a long time. But when this whole thing was happening, Raila reached out to me for an opinion. Because remember, after the jinx revolution, the cabinet was dissolved. And after that, William Ruto had to reconstitute his cabinet. And so I think there were some, the initial 4 senior leaders of ODM who joined Kenya Kwanza administration as ministers. I think there were some who are determined. And I get the feeling they must have pushed Raila strongly. Because Raila's view would have been, he shared this with me, that let's have a national convention. Have a national convention because the country is in a poor state. Let's have now, beyond the national dialogue, have a convention and then start up with, or end up formulating a transitional government. That would be the time when then Azimio would have proposed so many people to join. But what instead happened, William Ruto must be a very happy man. Yeah, that's why I say my friend Raila was snookered. Yeah, because he got what he wanted, he got the cabinet in place, and he's moving. Bila taarifa yoyote, bila makubaliano yoyote. And I think I've seen Raila also saying that they are still in opposition. Because nothing was agreed.
Do you think he is in the opposition?
You should ask him. Because these things are very heavy. These are very heavy matters, and I think we need clarity going forward.
So you say Azimio hasn't sat in a while.
At that level?
Yes.
Of course we meet. I told you, we've been very active, dealing, always being on the side of the people, with colleagues like Eugene Wamalwa, Jeremiah Kioni, Governor Waititu. By the way, he goes to a function in Ruiru, and I don't know what he said in Kikuyu. The next thing, before I left the country, I had to go to DCI. I was not even a senior counsel allowed to go and see Baba Yao. Okay? Now look at the level to to which this country is sinking. Because apparently he said things which are unpalatable to some people. There are even bloggers, by the way, who cannot now feel so intimidated. So you kuna mama anaitwa Oko na wengine akisema hii na hii unachukuliwa unawekwa ndani. How many names have some of us been called? You know some of them. The names I have been called. I have never taken that to heart. Because this is a state, we want to develop a country where Kenyans are free to criticize without intimidation.
So the Azimio meeting, and we've seen several of those meetings where Raila Odinga has been significantly absent for quite a number of those meetings.
Yeah.
What, in your view, is the state of the Azimio coalition now, considering everything that's happened over the last 2 months or so?
We are limping, to be honest. We are limping. And I actually called Raila, I was out of the country, on this voting thing. I said, you are a leader. It's important that the coalition on the floor of the House should be seen to talk with one voice. And he said, yeah, was going to call Junet or people like that. It was important. But then I think the ODM wing said they want to vote with their conscience. And of course, it's their right, they voted. But where does that leave? Because you have Junet Mohammed singing more loudly than Kimani Ichung'wah on how to impeach Gachagua, all right? And then you have his deputy, Robert Mbui of Wiper, opposing it. It makes the coalition look odd. So we are limping, to be honest. And therefore...
So what are you going to do about that?
We are consulting. We are consulting.
Okay.
First of all, we wish Raila well, because he's going to be busy looking for the chairperson position of the African Union. We wish him well. We issued strong statements in that support. And we see he has handed over to Peter Nyang'-Nyong'o.
For ODM?
Yeah, for ODM.
For Azimio?
For Azimio, he hasn't handed over.
Should he?
I don't know.
In your view?
I think he should.
As one of the leaders of Azimio?
He should, but he should not be duty-bound. He shouldn't. We have decided, all right, that we have to constitute a strong opposition. This country deserves it. Because if we don't, the runaway corruption, you haven't seen nothing from Andani to JKI Andani to power transmission to shift. I mean, look at it, the state of our health. And all of us, I personally think the matter of universal health care is everybody's right. But look at it now. Patients are dying in hospital because of the confusion. So we will be strong in opposition. We are very definitely and deliberately so. And that's why I keep on mentioning these names. All right? Jeremiah Kioni, Eugene Wamalwa, because the governors are working. Governors are working. And the 44, by the way, who voted no, not because of Gachagua, but they have shown they are listening to the ground. Okay. So those numbers are growing exponentially.
All right. So you've seen...
And we will be having the loyal position because it's important. And I suspect William Ruto may not even want to have the position of official leader of opposition created. I'm sure he will not allow.
Well, does that work in the current constitutional dispensation?
Well, we deliberated on these things, including the office of Chief Cabinet Secretary to be Prime Minister. Yeah. But the whole thing requires a referendum, okay? Yes. Requires a referendum. But even then, there was supposed to be stopgap measure for the sake of democracy in the country. Okay. We will fight on. And, you know, we said yesterday, we'll fight everywhere. In the streets, if need be, because demonstrations are everybody's right. And Article 37 of the country's constitution. We will fight in court, like on Thursday we were in court over JKI matter and Dandani. We will fight, we will pray. And Kenyans must remain focused. Because if we now give way and all throw our arms in the air, because there's a state of hopelessness, what happens to this country?
Considering Raila Odinga is now going for, the chair of the AUC, and you can see the moves he's making in terms of, relinquishing leadership of his ODM party. Should he still remain as leader of Azimio? Will you be convening?
Actually, we have discussed that, and I'm sure Raila will not. I'm sure Raila will not mind me saying this. That we have discussed that in terms of the recommendation from the NADCO report that there will be leader of official position, he was willing to have me take over that position. I was to be deputized, by the way, by my friend now is Minister for Cooperatives, okay? Wycliffe Ambessa Oparanya, okay? So, and we had to get somebody also from Jubilee, and Uhuru was supposed to nominate one. That was the agreement that time. Whether or not it is valid now is a different matter.
Well, it's certainly not valid now because one of those members is a cabinet
secretary. No, he can nominate another one.
So who would nominate that?
He can nominate Gladys Wanga.
What if he doesn't?
Well, you know, I'm saying in terms of the NADCO report.
Yeah, no. NADCO report aside, I mean, for right now,
if it goes
he
through
is
Parliament,
pursuing his ambitions at AUC.
Knowing him, he will nominate somebody. Oh, yes, he will nominate. But if it doesn't happen, then he doesn't have to nominate.
Okay, then
I think that William Ruto... Sorry. Well, Azimio is Azimio. Okay? We, as I said, we are consulting on whether there's viability in the light of what has happened in the recent past. Whether Azimio should continue as Azimio, or whether some of us are thinking in terms of the Gen Z revolution, right? We form another type of a coalition and allow ODM or something to continue as opposition for whatever benefit. But some of us are determined that this country deserves a strong opposition. And we prepare ourselves to do the needful and to make sure that Kenyans register as voters. These Gen Zs in particular, this administration should prepare to make sure that every Kenyan who is eligible to take a vote is given his ID or ID and registered as a voter. I can assure you, we will use a tooth comb when it comes to the composition of the next IEBC commission, all right, to make sure never again shall we have stolen elections.
The matter of the IEBC is in limbo at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It is, and we hope it can happen quickly. You know, we, as Azimio Coalition, we proposed two names. One, to join the panel.
Yes.
One was Professor Adams Olo, and the other one was Koki Muli. All manner of hurdles have been put in the face of Koki Muli, and we have said, because the judgment is on Tuesday the 22nd,
yes,
whichever way it goes, we don't want this process to be held captive. We can get Koki Muli for other positions, if it comes to that. But if people care about gender, this is the only opportunity they have to actually demonstrate as Azimio that we also care about gender. And if you look at the credentials, because we are going to look at every person who is going to apply to become a commissioner for IBC. What credentials? First of all, I think we may have to employ artificial intelligence to know which of the Kenyans can stand the temptation to be bribed to steal an election.
What do you think of Raila's chances at the AUC?
I last spoke to him when he was going to the General Assembly in New York, and naturally out there he would meet with African heads of state, perhaps one-on-one. But of course, the chief sponsor is William Ruto, because it's a country position. So President Ruto must have been going around with him in meeting some of the heads of state. And after that, was supposed to follow them to their capitals. Now, there are some countries, particularly in West African region, like Burkina Faso, Mali, I think Niger, who may not vote because the AU Constitutive Act stipulates that if you have taken leadership by military coup d'etat, you don't. And I think the same perhaps, I think Sudan may be different because General Boran is properly in place. So taken together, if we can marshal about 33 countries, then our brother Raila will become the chairperson.
Do you think?
But it's a fight.
Yeah, and how do you think they're conducting the campaign?
I haven't caught up with them since Unga. I haven't.
Okay.
So I think I'll be looking for him.
All right.
Or he's at liberty to brief me. Maybe he may think, because I do have a few friends in there, I could also assist.
Would you if you were called upon?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
To campaign for him is a country position.
In an interview on TV 47 just a couple of weeks ago, you said, and I quote, "Nilipoona Ruto akisema amepata support ya Algeria, nilipata wasiwasi kidogo. Ukipata hizi support usitangaze. Hii ni hali ya kuelewa diplomasia. Ruto alikosea. Because of Algeria, Morocco itampinga." You were seeming to cast aspersions on the manner in which the campaign is being conducted.
Cast aspersions. I was giving bona fide, sincere advice. That's how our sister Amina lost. Because the question of Polisario Front is a very key matter between Sahrawi Republic, Algeria, and Morocco. All these are countries. I'm sure our viewers will not remember that in 1979, Morocco pulled out of OAU here in Nairobi when President Moi took over as a chairmanship. All right? Eventually, Morocco came back and joined the AU. So there are those regional tensions, and they need to be carefully handled.
The president
Because
of Sahrawi
Morocco,
was here for the inauguration of...
The president of
Sahrawi.
Do you remember what happened then?
For the inauguration of
William Ruto. Do you know what happened?
Yeah.
Do you remember what happened? The following day, William Ruto received a delegation from Morocco, and he put a tweet to say that Kenya has severe diplomatic relations with Sahrawi Republic.
So you think that's done and dusted?
And I think it was Gachagua who helped him to sort it out.
Oh, it was?
I think Gachagua made some comments to try to handle the situation. But it was very embarrassing. We have relations with Morocco, very sound relations. With Algeria, very sound relations. And with the Sahrawi Republic. I can tell you one time, somebody also made a mistake in Foreign Office, made the same announcement. Museveni next door received the ambassador of Sahrawi Republic in Entebbe. So these things are delicate, and people need to understand the balancing. Yeah.
Okay. I want to take some questions now from viewers. Let me start with this one here. Please ask Kalonzo whether he would take the DP job if it were offered to him by President Ruto.
First of all, it has not been offered, and that Kenyan friend should know, if he listened to our interview, that Ruto intends to have a deputy president in place by Friday. He has not approached me because he knows I will not accept. I think I've answered him.
You have indeed. Let's take a look at other questions and comments from our viewers. There they are. Please ask Kalonzo, this is from Son Teddy, considering the history of conflicts between presidents and their deputies in this country, what could possibly come between two leaders who know they're guiding the nation together? Could it be money?
Oh. Your guess is as good as mine. Quite frankly.
From your personal experience?
Oh.
In that position?
I don't know. We have heard of deals and deals, right? Did we not even hear stories about KEMSA in these impeachment proceedings, which I think Gachagua handled himself? I don't know. This is why some of us are seen to be strangers. Because if you allow money to be the call of leadership, then you don't have a country. And I think that's the story that jinxes have told us, that they have very little confidence in people who think that they can go flashing around their wealth and then buy votes. You know, Yvonne, the next election will be very interesting. For the first time, Kenyans might go back to say, if you come around carrying tons of money to buy our votes, keep your money. will give a vote to a young Gen Z who has no money.
Speaking of young Gen Zs, you know, having them take leadership, do you think you're the right person to lead a country that is predominantly youthful? Because one of their calls has been having more youthful leadership. I know your birthday is coming up on the 24th of December.
I don't know how old you are, Yvonne. How old are you?
Well, I'm not a politician.
Well,
but
no.
My question to you would be,
yes.
Do you think you are the right person to lead
I would
a
love
country
to answer, which is youthful.
Yeah, allow me to ask the question. To lead a country of youthful people who have, you know, significantly repudiated people who have been in office for decades, and you have been a politician for well over 20 years, 30 even. Are you the right person then to lead Gen Z who've said, enough, we don't want people who've been in power, who've been rotating from one seat to the next, you've been vice president, you've been minister, party leader, you name it. Are you the right person based on what was being said in this country in June and July?
Thank you. Very good question. The youth will require mentorship. Even from the discussion we have had, for example, around this issue about AU chairmanship and diplomatic conduct, these youthful Kenyans will require leaders who can guide them along. I've said publicly, we want to get hold of this country's leadership, straighten it, and pass it on to the next generation, because they will need time to prepare. And our business is to prepare them. We cannot be there forever. And again, even through AI, through Googling, they're able to carry out their own research on every political leader, and I encourage them to. And if they find a speck, not even a speck, perhaps reason to think this leader has stolen from us, from our parents, then they should actually dismiss them, including me. But if they find there's somebody who has lived through the years, has all the experience from being an ordinary member of parliament for 1 year in 1983 or thereabouts, 85, sorry, and became assistant minister, became minister. Now from assistant minister, deputy speaker for 5 years, became minister for foreign affairs twice, minister for the environment, minister for tourism and information, vice president, minister for home affairs, minister for education. What do you do with that knowledge? Don't you think that is what the country is missing? And don't you think perhaps William Ruto plus Gachagua may have been missing in that respect? And so maybe this is a president the country has not had. Maybe the time has come.
Let's take another question now from our viewers. Here we go, from Peter Gesura. Ask Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka his thoughts about opposition currently in Kenya and whether Azimio One Kenya is intact after ODM members joined government. I think you spoke to this already, but
I think I've spoken to that.
Yeah.
Then there's the next one there.
Bahati Joseph asked Kalonzo Musyoka if he understands the reason for impeachment of Gachagua, political reasons. Apart from the 11 grounds, did he do something or what went wrong?
How would I know? I wish I knew. I don't know, quite frankly, whether he did something wrong or what went wrong. Remember, I spoke about even their wonderful spouses, right? Yeah, the first lady, the second lady, praying together, even getting international speakers in the area of the faith-based religion. Remember, Benny Hinn came here, all of them were there. And so I think there's something which the two of them may know. And maybe they're not at liberty to let us know. But it looks like one is so determined to get rid of the other, regardless of what the country thinks.
Okay. Here's a final question as we close. What does a former VP have to say about how the late President Kibaki managed to work well with his two VPs Mudia Warrior himself, and I believe we should also add here the late Kijana Wamalwa.
That's right.
You know, who was first, and then Mudia Warrior took over after his unfortunate passing. Any lessons for future presidents, or perhaps even this one, because we're in that moment right now?
I think, first of all, let's accept the reality of coalition building in Kenya, that going forward, and I think it's a good thing that leaders do not end up calling the shots, like if William Ruto was to be left alone with only yes men and minus Gachagua, everybody saluting Your Excellency forever. They even want to amend the Constitution. Have we not read? To even extend the term of the presidency to 7 years. Yvonne, if that was to come through, I'll be in the streets. And I know I'll not be alone. Because you can't afford to do that. Kenyans are waiting to get these people out and go home peaceably. All right? And then you want to extend another 2 years of pain? Pain mentally, mental anguish. Parents of their students, watoto wamesoma right through university, and they can't get jobs. There's no hope. There's actually hopelessness. And you want to think of extension of presidential term limit. And to make it sweet, that matter, by the way, came before the National Dialogue Committee. We dismissed it. All right? So you can't do that. They now want to put governors, Jewish senators, and everybody. I will encourage Kenyans to go to the streets and oppose it.
Okay. Your final advice, just to reiterate my question on how these relations can be enhanced, because you know, being in a position like this where we are being forced to contend with the relationship between two of the top leaders in the country,
as I said,
it's in a good space to be.
Again, Yvonne, please allow me to reiterate the fact all this is diversionary. We have urgent issues to deal with in order to reclaim our sovereignty, to safeguard our critical infrastructure, which includes our international airport, our transmission power lines, our healthcare system, our education system. Do you know they've even passed some legislation on seeds? Do you know that we have even, we're eating GMO foods?
Are we, Mr.
Yes.
Kalonzo Musyoka?
And the law says if you go to a supermarket and there's GMO food, the shopkeeper, whoever, should say this is GMO, this is organic. There's no distinction. Do you know that our late mother, my late mother used to keep mahindi anaweka kwa store and smoke it, because then she would plant that in the next season. Now you are forced to buy whatever you plant from Kenya Seed something, right? It's only once. So we are getting colonized even at that level. These are urgent issues. That's a bill
that's yet to be passed into law.
I think there's the Seed Act, which may have gone through, all right? And by the way, when I said the courts are our last line of defense, do you know the day Gachagua was impeached by the National Assembly, right? For fear that now his lawyers will file pleadings to try and stop it, the judicial digital system failed, I think, for 24 hours.
Is that so?
That is serious. So I think I expect Chief Justice Martha Koome and the team and the Judicial Service Commission to actually say no to this type of manipulation. So when you see me coming before Citizen Studios and others to shout, it is because we love this country. And we want this country to grow up a democratic country, corruption-free, if it is not corruption-free, at least manageable levels, all right? And have a future, have a country where we can be proud of.
That
all
is
right? But I'm also telling Kenyans, keep hope alive, don't give up. Kenyans, don't be intimidated. This is a document that we should all uphold at every given, whether Gachagua or Ruto or the ministers. This is very important. And anything that goes against the written statements of this document, of this constitution, the supreme law of the land, and anything else done contrary to this, the constitution itself is void to the extent of such inconsistency.
Indeed, that's a good place to leave it. Thank you very much for making the time for us for this extensive conversation. Honorable Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, Senior Counsel, former Vice President of the Republic of Kenya and Wiper Party Leader. We thank you for your time on The Explainer with us this week on the eve of the Senate proceedings that are taking off tomorrow. Let's take a break here on The Explainer. We have more news for you when we return, so please stay with us.